Hello and welcome to the Warrior Artist Podcast, bringing you insights into artist practice to inspire you on your creative journey. My name is Éadaoin Glynn, and today is a different episode. It's a little bit of a catch-up. I've recorded all these amazing interviews and I haven't yet released them. I've just been really busy, and if you've been following me on Instagram, you're aware of why I've been really busy. So I just thought I'd do a quick chat today to talk to you about what I've been doing and also what I've learned and what might help some of you as well. I've been painting, I've been busy painting. I've been working on 2 solo exhibitions, which is an amazing opportunity for me. And I just want to share a little bit about that process and what I've learned. And then hopefully very soon I'll get back to the interviews and all these amazing interviews with these amazing Irish artists that I can't wait to share with you. About a year ago, I was offered a solo exhibition in Limerick Museum by Maurice Quillinan, and actually I have a great interview with Maurice. It's episode 7. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it, because he talks about opportunities and grasping opportunities and how they're out there. So he gave me an opportunity. He gave me the opportunity of a solo exhibition. And for me, what you would call emerging artist or early career artist, that's an incredible opportunity. I've been in group shows and I've talked to you about the process of applying for them and the rejection. But going to a group show, even though it can be quite intimidating and scary, you just send off your painting, you arrive, it's hanging there, you might meet some artists. This is a very different experience. A solo exhibition is your work on its own. It's very exciting. It's an incredible opportunity, but it's also very daunting, and there's something quite vulnerable about showing just your own work and saying, here I am, this is what I'm about, this is what I'm doing. And I wanted to be really proud of the work. I'm a member of NetDlr in Dublin, and they gave opportunities for artists to have solo exhibitions. So I also applied to that, and they have various selectors, and in my case the selector was Nuala Clarke, and Nuala selected me. I was one of, I think, 12 artists she selected for a year, a month of exhibitions. So I also was awarded that exhibition last year, so that's 2, and I just had to focus on painting. I really had to focus on that. So that's what I've been doing. And if you follow me on Instagram, you've seen some of my process and my journey and the struggles along the way. Back to the first exhibition in Limerick Museum. Limerick Museum is a public museum. It's the oldest museum in Ireland, and it has a huge archive. I think it's the largest archive in Ireland. And it's a public space, and it's in a small Franciscan friary currently in Limerick. I think they've had various places they've lived in, and this is their new home, their current home. And at the back of it, there's an exhibition space, a gallery space. And this is the space where Maurice invites artists with the museum to exhibit in, and I was lucky to be given one of those slots. But what he said to me is, you have to find something in the museum to build a new body of work about. So that was the proviso, the kind of limitation. And limitations are good because it means you can't just do anything. I was excited. I said, yes, of course, you got to say yes to these opportunities. I said yes. And I went out. I went to the museum. I walked around, and it's a history museum with a small, really interesting exhibition. But I struggled to find something that inspired me. I saw an amazing exhibition when I was there. It was inspired by Limerick lace, and the artist is Lizzie Kinsella. And if you don't follow her, you should follow her on Instagram. I loved that exhibition, and it was really abstract, and it was really my kind of language. So I was very excited by that. The only thing I saw that sort of interested me were these sweet molds, because the shapes were abstract shapes. And I thought that's maybe something I can work with. They had information about, they had tins of toffee and tins to do with Cleves factory, Cleves Toffee, which the building is very iconic. It's still in Limerick. So I went on a deep dive for months researching Cleves factory, and it's a fascinating period in Limerick's history. I did that for a long time. I had phone call meetings with Dr. Matthew Potter, the curator of the museum, and I was like researching, I was writing, I was going down these tunnels. And then at one stage I just stopped and I checked myself and I said, where are the paintings? And there weren't any paintings. I was researching, but there was nothing visual that I wanted to paint. I abandoned all that research and I started again. I went back this time to the digital archive, and as I said, they have the largest digital archive. Anybody can access it. I just started searching there, And eventually at some stage I typed in, I think, woman or girl. I'm a woman artist. I'm very interested in female narratives and female stories. I've always been interested in that. So I thought, okay, I'll start with that. I found eventually these incredible photographs, and immediately I had that sort of visceral reaction, that kind of excitement. I felt something. I felt something emotional. And I think for me, when I'm painting, I have to find that emotional reaction and then I can paint. And that's what I've been searching for. One of the words of advice I would say if you're researching is to trust the process of researching, that eventually you will find your inspiration and it will take its time. And it was actually Pauline Flynn, who I've also interviewed, one of my first interviews, I think maybe episode 5. I met her at an exhibition last summer at Eamon Coleman's exhibition, who I've also interviewed. So it's all this circularity of meeting people here on podcast and then meeting them in real life. And I was a little bit stressed at the time because I hadn't found my source of inspiration. It was summertime and I felt the clock was ticking and I wanted to be painting. I didn't know what I was doing. And she said, just trust that you'll find it. And it calmed me down. Very soon after that, I did find my inspiration. So thank you, Pauline, for that. The words of wisdom. So I found these photographs and I immediately had all these questions. I imagined who took them, and I had all these ideas in my head. Perhaps they were taken by people to send to people who'd emigrated, or when people used to go around. Professional photographers were very rare at the time and people would pay to have their photographs taken. I contacted the museum and I said, what's the story behind these photographs? I had all these questions. Who took them, who they were, why they were taken. They said they had no idea. The photographs were a huge mystery. They'd been found in a skip in a basement. They were being dumped. Many of them were broken. They were old glass slides and they were just donated to the museum archive. They had them scanned in the 90s. That might be when they were found. There was about 800 of them. And they recognised the buildings were Limerick, but they have no idea who the people were, why they were taken. And they're so busy, they hadn't researched it. I started then on that journey of working with them. I really consider myself an abstract painter. I love painting abstract paintings. But here I had this inspiration with these photographs of these women, and how was I going to make them into paintings? So it felt very reaching for me and very much outside of my comfort zone. I think the next thing I learned is about experimenting and having that time. I had a year, so I had enough time to play and experiment and allow myself to try new things. And because I'm self-taught, I give myself my own arts education. Whenever I can, I go on workshops. I try and learn new things. Last summer, I was interviewing all these amazing artists. And at the end of it, because I'm interviewing here in my studio, we'd have our interview. And then at the end, we'd always have a little chat. And I'd say, do you mind me asking you something? And I would just show them what I was working on and ask for feedback, because I interviewed some amazing printers. And I was saying, maybe I should do prints because the photographs are so strong. It made me start thinking about that. So it was all useful. And I would say is ask for help, ask for feedback, ask questions of any artist, because they're all just human people and most people are really happy to give advice and help. So that led me to experiment with printmaking. I saw there was a workshop in Court Printmakers, which is adjoined to the Backwater, where I'm a member, right beside the Laoghaire Gallery. So I went on a weekend workshop about printing. I had my photographs, I had my source photographs, a couple of images, and I thought maybe I'll try learning how to print. I thought maybe I could layer with images, with colours. I went to the Andy Warhol exhibition in Dublin, in the Hugh Lane, and when you go to see an exhibition, it's often not the most famous pieces that draw your attention. There was a large Chairman Mao, which I'd never seen before, and I loved it because it was a screen print, but over the top of it he'd painted these oil painting, these colours, and I thought that's something interesting. Maybe I could do something like that. I could somehow reproduce the photograph and then paint in an abstract way on top of it. So that was one idea I had. And then the other thing I really loved was he had these prints of Jackie O. They were really small and they were black and white, printed on different coloured blue canvases. And I also really liked those, and I just thought maybe I could do something like that. That was my initial idea with the printmaking workshop. I did the workshop and it was really interesting to learn about printmaking. As I said, it's my own education. But ultimately at the end of it, I realised I don't really want to be a printer. I want to be a painter. I want to paint. Then I signed up for a portrait workshop with Salvatorde de Lucan and Zsolt Basti in Artform. Artform has wonderful workshops and they're usually over weekends, which really suits me. And that was great because it got me thinking about composition and painting. The photographs were very small, my source material. And there was lots of them, but I narrowed it down to about 10 that I really liked. And I painted them over and over again, and I painted them in lots of different ways. And I started off reproducing it pretty much as it was, which was a person or two people standing in front of a house. I experimented with painting these houses in interesting ways, maybe abstract ways, but I realized I don't enjoy painting buildings. I don't enjoy painting straight lines. And what I was really interested in were the people, the young women, and trying to catch their expression. So I kept zooming in first to the figure and then to the face and the eyes and just trying to catch their expression. Because I didn't know their story, I tried to imagine the emotion. And because the photograph was taken outside in direct sunlight, glass slides were pre-flash, their eyes were in shadow. So you just got a shape where their eye was and maybe a shape where their nose and their mouth. But I could sense the emotion, and that's what I was trying to capture. I struggled with it. I just drew and painted over and over again. There was no great strategy to my process. I just worked really hard. I just painted them over and over again. And I have painted my own portrait and people in my family. And I think when you paint somebody, you're familiar with their planes, their face. And the more I painted them, I developed a shorthand in how to paint them. I became more and more familiar with them. It was like muscle memory. I drew them and then I painted them. I worked in multiples. I worked in lots of paintings at the same time. I don't work well if I'm working on one painting and finish it and then the next one. I just work on lots and I keep going from one to the other. And I find there's an energy in that. It keeps it fresh. Eventually I ended up with these paintings which were quite figurative and they weren't really me. And I also felt they weren't really the women because in the glass slide, their faces, their eyes are just shadows. So when I was painting in precisely where I thought the eyes were and the creases and the pupils, it wasn't true to what they were. I was guessing and it often felt wrong. It didn't feel like the correct emotion. Then I started taking risks. I had enough paintings because I just kept painting and painting as I thought, okay, I'll keep painting and painting until I find my way, my path. And I was abandoning ideas. Then it was the winter time. It was Christmas holiday period. It was that winter light, which is very dark and dusky. And I had these very tight paintings and I just didn't like them. They were fine, but I didn't like them and they didn't feel true to me. So I wanted to paint portraits that were true to the women, also true to me as an artist. So I just started taking risks, and with one of them, it was a large crop of her face. I had my palette mixed up and I just smeared out her face in a pale whitey skin coloured, and then I turned off the light and I just dipped my brush in dark colours. I roughly knew where the colours were, but because I was working in that dusky light, everything was in grey tones. I could see what I was doing, but it helped me move out of my thinking head and tap into the way I paint when I paint abstractly, if that makes sense. And I was trying to paint in that kind of raw, gestural way, that energy of abstract painting in a portrait. I just tried to make those shapes, and I tried to make them with very simple, clean lines. The marks of where in the photograph you could see the hollows of their eyes and the mouth, and not thinking about the colour or palette or mixing. And then I turned on the light and I liked what I had done. That first one worked. I liked it and I just felt, okay, I'm onto something. So then I did that to a lot more of them. Not all of them worked out. A lot of them didn't work out, but some of them, enough of them worked out that I felt I'm onto something here now. It's quite laboursome because what I would do is I'd paint a portrait very precisely, take a really long time painting it really accurately. And then I would just keep painting the same painting over and over again on different canvases. These were all different paintings until it started becoming looser and more abstract. I could refer back, I could look at the more precise one to see, okay, I've worked out the shadows, I've worked out all those questions. So now I can stop thinking about it and I can just start thinking about shapes and colours, which is how I like to compose abstract paintings. And I like to think I caught a kind of haunting quality of the photographs and the emotion. So taking risks, it worked out for me. I painted in the dark. I also used mixed media, collage, all the kind of things in my wheelhouse of an abstract painter's. And then the other thing I would say is if you're following your emotion, when you feel something working, stop. don't, keep going. And that's why working in multiples helps me, because something was working. I just actually say to myself inside my head, stop, Aideen, stop painting. Because if I kept going, I would just ruin it or lose that energy. That beautiful mark would be gone. And because I was working wet and wet, I had to let things dry. So that's why going from one to the other in an intense session really worked for me. I had read somewhere that when you're working on a solo exhibition, you should aim to be ready a month beforehand. So that was in my head. I was working towards that, but I really was panicked and scared. But there was a few good ones there, and I just kept going. I had enough finished a month beforehand, and then I got sick with the flu, and I was lying at home in bed, and then the museum contacted me saying that there'd been a cancellation before me, and the gallery space was empty, and could I install early? Again, I had to say yes. You have to say yes to these opportunities. I said yes, and then I had one mad weekend of doing all the finishing work, edges, titling, varnishing, hanging mechanism, and then 2 paintings that weekend I completely changed. It was a bit like your finals in university or your leaving cert. I just worked really hard. I pushed myself, and I think that's the joy of a deadline. You have to go for it. I felt I'll take chances in changing these paintings because I have enough other works to select from them, and luckily they paid off. They worked. Those 2 last paintings made it into the show. What I've also learned is less is more, and about curating. Now, I have no experience of curating. My last solo show was 4 years previously, just before lockdown, and it was when I organised myself in a cafe in Cork City, where I just put up my work and I invited everybody, and it was a great experience. But this was really different because this was a curated show and it had a theme, and I was nervous. But Maurice Quillinan is so kind. He agreed to hang the show, and then he helped curate it and put it together, and he was giving me some feedback over WhatsApp and phone calls telling me stop painting or look at that one again. He told me bring about 20 pieces, so I did that, and then we just hung 9 of them. And he said it's basically about the space you have. You don't overfill it, and there are certain spaces, and you put your best work in those spaces, and if you have a bigger space you can hang more work, and a smaller space you hang less, and that it was that simple. And there's somebody who invigilates within the space, and he had a desk, so that corner nothing could hang there, so there was a door and window, so it was really just 2 big walls and 1 half wall. So we hung 9 paintings, 8 big and 1 tiny one. Maurice had also said to me, he'd met me for coffee in the summer in the early stages where I was still painting buildings and panicking, and he had said to me, don't waste this opportunity, which I thought was a really interesting thing to say, that work at it and don't waste it. So I did work. I worked really hard, and I really wanted to not waste the opportunity and be proud of the work and do the best I could at the stage I'm at now. But then I think you've got to not waste the opportunity of your exhibition. You've got to document it. I had bought a small little tripod on Amazon, little portable thing, like something you'd use for cameras. And I put that in the corner, and I stuck my camera on it, and I did a time-lapse video of Maurice hanging the show. When he left, I just took lots of photographs and videos so that I had something for Instagram to showcase it. And it's something lovely about seeing your work hanging in a space. I really enjoyed it. It was so different to in the studio where they're all cluttered and hanging. The work looked really well. It looked well together. Now, what I didn't do is take professional photographs, and I wish I had done that. Got someone to just go in and take really good shots. I just took shots on my phone. Then, of course, you've got the opening. Now, the opening it's a formality. Part of me almost didn't care. I was so exhausted by the time the work was up there. I just wanted to take a break. But the opening is important because it's something to invite people to. I invited everybody on Instagram, my mailing list, any curator I'd met or had any connection with. I invited everybody I knew. On the day of the opening, there was a storm warning, there was a weather warning, and I just threw on a dress, did my makeup in the car in traffic on the outskirts of Limerick, and I aimed to get there an hour early. My sister, Éadaoin Glynn, who's a documentary filmmaker, yoga teacher, some of you may know her on Instagram. She was great. She came and she took photographs and documented for me. And the museum had a photographer, and some people came to the opening, which was great. It was speeches, but it's just a formality. It's almost like, here we are, now we're opening it, and you document it. I was nervous beforehand, but once it started, it was fine. And then going home, I was exhausted, but it was a great experience. And all the photographs from the museum photographer and my sister were great. I used those for the next few weeks on social media every day, different posts, different video. The next stage of an exhibition is promotion. You promote it coming up to it. You invite people to the opening. I left out business cards. I did up a price list, a little bit of a blurb about it, which I put up on the wall. I put a visitor book for people could sign in. I actually forgot the first week it was up. I forgot that. So the next chance I got, I brought that up there. People could leave comments and I just got a sense of who was there because you don't always know who comes. As I was bringing up that guest book, I met an artist who's part of an artist group. And I connected with that artist group and I said, would you like an artist talk about this exhibition? Because the research, everything was so fresh. The museum set up chairs and I just did a little artist talk. And that was great, actually. And I was, again, nervous beforehand. Once it started, I was fine. Because I knew what I was talking about. I knew the work so well. I knew the process, the research so well. So it was actually nice to talk about it. And I brought props. I brought all the photographs and I brought some of my printing experiments. So I had things to hand around. People asked questions. It was very informal and ultimately I enjoyed it. But what I decided to do is not waste that opportunity and to record it live on Instagram. And I hadn't gone live on Instagram, God, in years. So I was trying to remember how to do it. I used that little tripod. And then there was two lovely art students from Limerick College of Art who came along. And I just asked one of them, I said, look, would you mind just taking that camera? And if I move around, just point the camera at me. And I asked the other girl to take a few photographs of the talk again, so I could share it on social media. And that worked out really well. I actually had bought a little wireless mic that would connect to my phones. Even if I was far from my phone, the sound would be good. But of course, I packed it with me. I hadn't charged it properly. I had to abandon that idea. But it worked out really well. And there were so many people who couldn't come to the talk, but then who saw it afterwards. And I'll share a link to it here on the show notes if you want to listen to that. But that was, again, something else I could do. I didn't have an objective. People said to me, oh, I hope you get lots of red dots and sales. I didn't have sales as an objective at all. And I don't tend to get sales from exhibitions. I never go into an exhibition expecting to sell anything. The work for me always sells later for my website. And none of these paintings, these new paintings, were on my website because I wanted to keep them because I had another solo show and maybe to enter into open calls. So it suited me not to sell anything, to keep all the work back, to use it for something else. So that was not an objective. That was definitely not a focus for me. It was about showcasing my work, having a solo show, being able to say I was here and doing it and telling people about it. I really enjoyed the rigor of the research and creating a new body of work and how my work completely shifted into this kind of abstract portraiture and that tension between figurative and abstract. I thought there was something really interesting happening and I want to go further in that direction. And if I hadn't had this show, my work may not have moved that quickly. So I definitely know that's something I want to do more of and push myself in that direction. So that same week I was sick with the flu. NetDlr also contacted me and said, oh, how many paintings do you have for the solo space? And I was like, I don't know, because I was just thinking of the first exhibition. The Limerick show is just down and my next exhibition opens the 29th of May in Walters in Dunleary. It's a space upstairs. So NetDlr do exhibitions in Walters. It's a pub on Georgia Street in Dunleary. Huge space and they have great exhibitions. And then they have a small room upstairs. It's like a Georgian dining room or living room. And it's a very different space. There's not very many big walls, empty walls for large paintings. There's windows and panelling. So I think I need more smaller work. The work in Limerick was all large. So I'm thinking I'm not just going to put the same paintings up there again, because that was all about the response to the Limerick Museum. I might take some of those paintings, but I want to fit it in with a new theme. So I'm pushing myself. It's still linked to what I'm doing. So I'm in the middle of it now. Some of the work is behind me now. I'm still in that early stages where the work is very figurative. And I know now my process is I'm just going to keep painting them and then the magic happens and they'll get looser and more abstract. I'm just painting portraits of my daughters who are young women to tie in with the young women in Limerick. And it's going to be something about that female narrative and those kind of quiet moments. I don't have a title yet. It's in my head. Asking for advice, I connected with Diane Magee, who had a solo show in Walters last year. We're both members of the Backwater. So I just emailed her and I said, look, could I talk to you? So she gave me her number and I had a good chat with her because I was slightly panicking about the space because it seemed very awkward and difficult. I'd measured it, but every time I saw a show there, it looked different. I wanted to hang the work really well and have it curated and simple as Maurice had done in Limerick, but I couldn't see how to do that there because it's so different. So she gave me great advice on the sizes she had and what worked and what didn't work. And she also gave me a new piece of advice about having a catalogue. I thought that's fantastic advice. I'm going to share it here. And it's something I wish I did for Limerick because that would have been so interesting to have the photographs and the paintings. Maybe I will still do that. Who knows? And I think, again, I'm going to work towards having the work done a month in advance. So I have time to get the work photographed. Also, ArtNet want to have the paintings about 2 weeks in advance for their website and to design the poster. So I have another month, 3 weeks to 4 weeks to finish the work. And the way I seem to work is I seem to create a large output of paintings so I can select the best pieces. And it just seems to be the way they work. Some will work and some won't. And I'm just working on smaller pieces. So that's my plan. Yes, so I would say ask for help, ask for advice. So what I've learned, I learned that I like that research process, that rigor, and having to create a new body of work. And I think to trust that process. I learned to follow my emotion, to follow the things that I respond to. I learned to don't be afraid of leaving my comfort zone, which I've really left. And I still think of myself as an abstract painter. Also, you can break your own rules. You can make up your own rules and you can break them. You can really do what you want. Experiment, try things, play, and follow what excites you. For me, it's color, mark making, painting portraits in an abstract way, if that makes sense, and having that emotional response to them. For me, working in multiples, creating lots of work so that I can select the best pieces, and taking risks for painting in the dark, all that kind of mad stuff I did, trying new things, collage, and stopping, not overworking. When something is right, just stop. Some paintings will happen really quickly, a lot won't, but when that moment of magic happens, just stop. Don't kill it. And then not wasting the opportunity of a solo show in terms of promotion, doing artist talk, Diane's idea of the catalogue. But I've learned that I want to exhibit again. That's something I really enjoy doing. So I know that is now an ambition of mine. It's going to be a goal I'm going to set myself. I really enjoyed having 2 solo shows this year. It really set up my whole year. It gave me a huge focus. It also meant that when the show in Limerick opened, I didn't have that kind of lull because I was straight back I was promoting it, but I was also at the same time painting. I started painting immediately on new pieces for my next show. And there was that constant momentum. I really liked that energy it gave me, that focus and that drive of that hard deadline. Because up to previously, if I was working on paintings, the deadlines are ones I set myself, releasing work to my mailing list, online, Instagram. It was a self-generated deadline. So this was a real true deadline and it was very motivating. I want to apply for more opportunities and then there are open calls, not very many, but there are some in Ireland for solo shows or where you can apply with other people. So I've reached out to various artists and I put together 2 group proposals. I've done a couple of solo proposals. I've really thought more about what I want to do and what kind of work I want to create. It's really helped me refine my thinking for those dreaded artist statements and proposals. Really helped me understand what I want to do, which is that female narrative. I love painting abstractly. I don't see myself never going back there. And I think I'm struggling with how to tie the 2 together. And it's going to be a process I'm going to work with. This whole process of creating a body of work for a solo show has made me think very differently and reflect on my own work. It's changed my paintings. It's pushed me. I pushed myself and it pushed me. It was that push and pull. And that is something I want to do more of. I hope this is useful. If any of you are working on solo shows, I hope there were some helpful tips there. And just really to apologize for this long break in output or publishing of episodes. I have some incredible interviews and I can't wait to share them with you. But I just have been working so hard on my own work that I just couldn't even go there. I'm hoping to get this one out really quickly, just as an explanation. And then I think after the show opens in Dublin, and I will be sharing all about it on Instagram. You'll hear all about it and see all about it, undoubtedly. I will get back to publishing interviews here and also recording other ones. If you know anybody who would like to help edit a podcast, send them my way. It's not that hard, but it takes time, and time is short. I really enjoy the research and talking to the artists, but the kind of back end of publishing it and the bits and pieces you have to do there, I've just put off. I hope you find this useful, and hopefully normal service will resume very shortly as I have some amazing interviews I can't wait to share with you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Warrior Artist, and I'd be grateful if you could subscribe, follow, or even write a short review, as this helps people find me. Wishing you all the best with your creative journey, and remember that you are a warrior artist. Have a great week in the studio.